Welcome to our session on communicating with parents and guardians. This session is intended for educational purposes and only seeks to make recommendations regarding ways to communicate with parents and guardians more effectively. Most childcare facilities, as well as some states, may have very specific procedures and requirements regarding parental communication. Any established procedures should not be changed or altered in any way without first consulting your facility's director as well as your state's requirements. This session has been divided into 4 sections. First, we will look at the various elements that make up the communication process. Then, we will discuss some of the strategies and guidelines used to achieve successful communication. Next, we will examine the different forms of recurring communication between daycare workers and parents. Finally, we will talk about ways to handle the communication process when difficult topics arise. Each section will be followed by a series of multiple choice questions to help you monitor your progress. Communication, communicating, to communicate. We hear those words every day. But what does it really mean to communicate? And how do we do it well? According to the Merriam-Webster Online Dictionary, the definition of communicate is to transmit information, thought, or feeling so that it is satisfactorily received or understood. 4 main ingredients are indicated in this definition. To begin, communication requires 2 separate people or groups of people, one to transmit or send, and one to receive. Next, communications require a message consisting of information, thoughts, and/or feelings. And finally, the message must be satisfactorily received or understood. Notice that having a message or idea and then sending it on to someone else is not enough. The party must understand what you have said. This final step in the communications process is the step that tends to cause problems if communications should break down. In other words, if both sides do not have the same understanding of the information, then communication has not really taken place. In all daycare settings, there are several different parties who need to communicate with one another. Between one daycare worker and another, between the daycare facility and various state agencies, even between daycare workers and the preschool children themselves. In this lesson, we will be focused on one specific type of communication: communication between daycare professionals and parents and/or guardians of the children in their care. Notice that words like opponents or enemies and phrases like play to win or take no prisoners are not part of the definition of communicate. In fact, many experts have argued that for truly effective communication to take place, both parties involved, the senders and the receivers, need to want the same outcome. They may not agree on all the information. They may not agree on any of the information, but the same outcome should be desired in the end. Now, some of you may argue that occasionally this is not the case in the daycare setting. You may have witnessed or even experienced disagreements between childcare professionals and parents. Any disagreements, however, are not over the end result, but rather about how to get there. For both sides of this communication process do ultimately want the same outcome. Both sides want the children to thrive and succeed. When a disagreement does arise, it may help to remember that there are not 2 opposing sides to the ultimate goal. Instead, parents, guardians, and daycare professionals are on the same team and, in the end, want the same thing. To that end, it is important to focus on collaboration and compromise rather than competition and victory. For if both sides become preoccupied with winning, then the children are the ones who end up losing. An important element of the communication cycle is the length of the cycle. Sometimes a communication process is short-lived, as in the case of this session. I, as the sender, have a specific message to send. You, as the student, want to receive the information offered in this class. After the class is finished, our cycle will be complete. It is important communication, but it is not a long-lived process, and a deep relationship does not need to be established for it to be successful. The communications process between daycare professionals and parents and/or guardians is very different. Most likely, it is a much longer process, sometimes lasting several years. Consequently, successful communication under those circumstances requires a much deeper understanding of all the parties involved to be truly successful. A second important aspect of the communication cycle is the depth of the topic or purpose for the communications. Sometimes the topic is very small in scope, as in the case of this session, and does not have much emotional impact. Today, we are addressing the topic of communication between childcare professionals and the parents and/or guardians of the preschool-aged children in their care. And though learning about communication is important, it is not an emotional topic. In the daycare setting, however, the topic is quite deep and meaningful: how to help children succeed in their preschool years. And since this communication cycle involves the well-being of young children, it can easily become emotionally charged. As I mentioned earlier, the only way to successfully complete the communication cycle is to make sure that the message sent has been received and understood. The question is, how can we do this? The most effective way is to use a process called feedback. There are several forms of feedback. For the purposes of this session, you give feedback by successfully completing the quizzes at the end of each section. Correctly answering the questions indicates that you have received the information and understood it. In discussions, however, feedback is most successfully given through paraphrasing. Paraphrasing means that you listen to what is being said and then repeat what you have heard by putting it into your own words. You may also want to emphasize the fact that you are paraphrasing with an opening statement like, "I believe what you are saying is," or, "if I understood you correctly." Understanding the specifics of all of these elements for each particular situation is very important to establishing a successful communications relationship. Again, the communication cycle contains 4 elements: the 2 parties involved, the sender and the receiver, the message and the details surrounding it, and the feedback process that ensures that both sides have the same understanding of the message.